Blake, Rose, and Spears, and we are Supremely Black. I want to start off by saying Happy Black History Month to all my Black melanated people, but every day is Black History. So to us, we live this on a regular, but for them, we're going to celebrate the holiday that they gave us as well, the month that they gave us, and just be extra with it. So Happy Black History Month to all my Black and melanated people, and to all our allies who support us and are with the upliftment of and the empowerment of Black people. Salute to y'all as well. How y'all weeks been this week, fellas?
Been a very busy week. A little bit tired, but you know, it's all good. It's been an interesting week. It's been a busy but an interesting week at the same time. Everything's been good. First of all, I want to give a big shout out to Grambling State University for securing that NIL deal for their football program, and that every scholarship player gonna get paid for playing football. So that was huge, man. That was
Correction. It's not just for the football program. It's every scholarship athlete at Grambling University.
Oh, that's even bigger than I thought.
Basketball,
I was
track.
just reading about football.
Yeah, nah, it's overall in all athletics and sports. So that's what makes it even more impactful and, you know, trend setting and everything, because it's for all the scholastic athletes.
All right, cool. Well, huge shout out to them. Appreciate the correction. I was just reading on their football page or whatnot and was able to grab that information. So huge shout out to them. But my week has been good. Just a little busy, but no, we in there.
It's your boy Rose, man. It's been a cool week, relaxing. No complaints on my end. Just been, handling business, staying low. How about you, Spirit?
My week has been a little challenging, but nothing that's gonna stop my mission and my goal and what I'm trying to do. But there's been some questions that have appeared or come up, and you just gotta answer them how they come and keep trucking and keep moving. So outside of that, I'm blessed. Had a great conversation with some mentors and some people that I do some mentorship with at the schools and everything, just talking about Black history and implementing some things that we're trying to do in the high school for Black History Month, but then also just talking about Black leadership, the epicenter of it, and then the lack of certain figures or certain push for certain agendas or narratives from our Black leaders, or a lack of Black leaders from the 60s to now and stuff. And it was just a deep, profound conversation, and it kind of, it's going to tie in with today's topic. So for today's topic, we are asking the question, today's February 1st, Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. The episode will drop on Friday. That's the 6th or the 7th. Calendar.
No, that'll be 4th. It'll be 4th.
It'll drop Friday, February 4th. And so the question coming into Black History Month that we wanted to ask and that we wanted to be intentional about and talk about from your Supremely Black crew was integration a good thing, a bad thing? Should we have stayed segregated and stayed to ourselves? Did it hurt us or did it harm us as a culture and as a people? And so I'm gonna let one of y'all jump in on that first, and then we can go with it wherever the conversation leads.
With me, I start off first. Big kinfolk Jay Flake. I'm gonna say in some parts I'm 50-50 with it. Some parts it did hurt. Some parts it did help. What I wanted to discuss mainly is that in ownership. When we talk about ownership of land and housing, things of that nature, I think it did hurt some. We went from a point in time where we owned pretty much all our community and we owned the houses and the land and things of that nature. I was just looking up, doing a little research on one of the communities, Weeksville in New York City, in the state of New York, where it was over, which is now Bed-Stuy. That was the area that it was in, which is now Bed-Stuy, and it was owned or found after a guy by the name of James Week, and he was a free slave man who had purchased land from another white man, a plot of land, and that plot of land had grew as more and more black people started to come to the area. It got to the point where they had about 500 residents there. It was pretty much all black. They had owned some form of real property. During that time, you owned $250 worth of real property. There was a nice amount of money. You know, you pay taxes and then you become a voter during that time. This also was a neighborhood that had 2 schools, 2 churches, you know, so we talking about all black churches, lawyers' offices, hospitals, things of that nature. Very good, very thriving community during that point in time. I'll say the integration hurt situations like this due to the simple fact that that community is no longer, the community began to get smaller and smaller and smaller, as if you had gentrification coming in even back then. And you know, if you got $250 worth of land and they come in and offer you, you know, triple that, quadruple that, their land is being sold off. And then we have other people moving into the area. And then I think New York is still kind of battling with this as well, and with gentrification coming in and changing all neighborhoods and knocking down the projects, this, that, and the other. But this area was a thriving area, so it wasn't anything about knocking down projects. Everybody was working together as community. They come in, they gentrified the area, and then there go your, you know, your schools, your lawyer offices, and all this, and everything gets spread out, so that community is not as strong as what it used to be.
Yeah, to answer your question, I'm not a fan at all of integration. As I look back on it, I think about the times of how, using Black Wall Street for an example of how the Black dollar stayed within our communities. I feel as if that since that was one bomb that taken away from us that impacted us on a global sense. And by that, I mean, from a mental standpoint, is that being a part of their system or wanting to be included started to strip us from what we had as a culture within our own times. When you think about spending money outside of the community now, and I've talked about it on previous episodes, it's like it may stay in our community maybe 6 hours, 8 hours at the absolute most. To me, that took away our power. So now you think about things, how it's approached from a political standpoint, when people want to target or feel the impact of the dollar, all they do is pander to Black people or minority communities and say, oh, we're sorry, we do this, and we go back to spending. But the reason being is that since Black Wall Street was attacked, we haven't really gotten back to that. I don't know if it's from a lack of fear, lack of resources, or just because we're now integrated. It's, I want to be a part of your system, but I also want to be, you know, I guess cared for, or it's kind of like it's hard for us to identify the real enemy now, just because now we're integrated. It's, hey, I want to be a part of the system. Then it was never intended for us to be a part of it. So me, from a financial perspective, I don't care for integration. And from how, you know, talking to some elders and some people that have been around, some of their great grandparents that were here before we were here, segregation wasn't a bad thing. As long as they kept their communities protected, they really didn't care, honestly, to be around white people. So, you know, we see a time where everybody's included, but I also see a time where we don't have much of our own that's just, we could say individually, is just ours in the system of operating and being to ourselves and taking care of our own families and our villages, they used to say. What's your thoughts on the Spears?
So my thoughts on it is kind of twofold, because when you look up the definition of segregation and then the definition of integration, it makes you think about it in a whole different sense, or at least me, because I can only speak for myself. So it makes me think about it in a whole different sense. So I believe segregation was bad. And I don't think that we should have been segregated, because segregated took away the choice of us being looked upon equals, being able to live wherever we wanted to live, to where we chose, being able to eat where we wanted to eat, be able to shop where we wanted to shop, to be able to have the freedoms and liberties that a human being should have just as a God-given right. So I believe segregation is something that should have been abolished, terminated, dismantled, and taken away. Now, as far as integrating is coming together and immersing yourself in another culture, subculture, environment, or and for contextual terms and purposes. When I say integrating, I'm only talking about as a people in a race integrating into another people in a race. I think we shouldn't have integrated, because to y'all's point, and then just to the point of that I'm gonna make, is a lot of times we took away and we deprived our own people in our own communities of the wealth and resources that we could have kept in our communities for us to flourish and to survive and to maintain in today's society. And with us integrating and thinking that we needed to be at the same seats, at the same tables, at the same restaurants of Anglo-Saxon people or Caucasian people, it eventually worked to our detriment, to me. And so I don't think that we shouldn't necessarily integrate it. I do understand that we should have the choice of where we want to live, where we want to go, how we wanted to move. But I think as a group and as a culture, we should have said, we sticking right here and we keeping our land and our resources. We're keeping our dollars in our communities. We're making more millionaires or thousandaires at that time, because, you know, back in the day, what probably wasn't too many millionaires as from a per capita point of view like it is now in today's America. So thousandaires, and we're gonna keep that Black dollar in our communities and in our culture. So that's where I feel about that. Now, one thing I do want to say to your point, Flake, and a little bit to your point, Rose, is because, Flake, you talked about gentrification. And I haven't researched it, and I know this is going to be a two-part or three-part series, so I'll probably do more research on it then. But what happened if they started making the taxes of our land and our everything go up more and more, and because of a lot of our lack of job opportunities, lack of good paying jobs, if we did have a job, will we be able to keep that land even if we didn't want to sell it? Will we have been forced to sell?
I mean, we've seen that happen in previous episodes where we discussed where they have, you know, when we talked about the missing Black cities. So we had once was Black cities, and then being driven out by the raising of taxes or things like that to get people to move and force to sell their land, this, that, and the other. Now, this is where we say integration might not have been too good, but in some situations, we will have to work together as one between Black and white people, especially when we talk about the political table. So this is one of the things where we would have to work together, where we would have to integrate with other people and be at the table and fight for, you know, what you guys are trying to pass as a law is not going to help my community. Or what you trying to pass as a law is going to harm my community. We need to have X, Y, and Z to make sure this community is still thriving. So in some part of it, we still will have to discuss and talk with each other. Some part we still got to work together as far as when it comes to business. I'm not saying that all over. I'm saying my point is, that's why I said I was 50-50 in the beginning. At some point, we have to work together, and there ain't nothing wrong with, all right, I'm going back to my community, you got to go back to your community, and then we gonna look out for each other. I'm gonna protect my community, you protect your community, our dollars gonna circulate within this community, but at some point you will have to work together. In that situation, of course, we see it happening today where they raise taxes and people are forced out and forced to live. But the catch to that is, in a situation where you're raising taxes, not only are you hurting the impoverished on your side of the fence, you hurting the impoverished on my side of the fence as well. So the people at the bottom, the poor people, most definitely gonna feel that hurt and pain. So it's kind of one of those sketchy type of situations where you're gonna have people that's gonna uproot their house. But once again, that's where we would have to work together as one and integrate at that political table to make sure things like that does not happen. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, it did. And my question was kind of rhetorical because, again, like we said, we talked about this on previous episodes, so we all know the answers and everything. But I was just saying, just from what you said and, gentrification, but then also just the standpoint of, some people saying, I'm not going to be able to afford this land no more. So that might have been why they sold out and got the money they could, so then they could find another development or a plot of land where they could afford it or whatnot. So I was just bringing that up for conversational purposes.
Yeah, and which we'll have some of those. And when you have those situations, once again, that's us sticking together as a community to make sure Miss Martha don't lose her house. You know what I'm saying? When we had to come together, as like I stated, there was 2 Black churches where we come together as a church and say, hey, the Smiths, the Wilsons, and the Johnsons gonna lose their house. We had to come together as a church and community to make sure these people do not lose their house. But you always gonna have that one that's gonna be like, hey man, look, I can take this quadruple amount of money they offer me and go move by the beach, and they're gonna be up out of there. You always gonna have that regardless. But once again, that's where we have to come together as a community to make sure that people who want to stay and are gonna lose their house, to make sure that they getting taken care of during that time frame. But I wasn't there. I'm not for sure exactly what happened, but I would hope some fight like that happened.
Did Rose, you didn't have nothing to continue or anything?
No, I didn't have anything in regards to that. I mean, that's his thoughts on that one. So no, I ain't got nothing to say on that.
Okay. So my question to y'all is, do y'all see from the way that I explained it, do y'all see integration and segregation as the same, or do y'all see it as different entities or aspects?
I mean, I think that of course, they're individually different. I guess my overall thing would be is, I guess, a matter of how do you take segregation? Because my thing is if you're never wanting to be included in somebody's system, I don't think segregation matters. Like if I don't want to use your bus, I don't have to use your bus. I don't, you know what I'm saying? If I don't want to use your bathroom, I don't want to use your bathroom. It's like, I think it's just more or less of, I wonder what changed mentally then from back then is where if we weren't allowed to do something, if we've built up a lot within our own communities, what made us say that, hey, I want to use this white man's water fountain? That's my, my honest question. I wish I could talk to some people during those times that could really just explain of what was the difference that they felt as if that it was of lesser quality, or did we feel that we couldn't build it for ourselves, or what really triggered for it to be a point that in order for us to live the life that we want to live, we must use and be included in everything that they're pushing for or they have for themselves, or that we built and we're not being able to use, but can we not build it for ourselves? Like, and that's a tough question. I know a lot of people might not be a fan of it, but what made us in our mindset think that we must now use the stuff that they have that's designed for them and not for us to continue to push and create for ourselves like we've always done? That's my thoughts on it. Yeah.
I semi have an answer for that just from some research and then some conversations with my older aunts and uncles, like great aunts or great uncles, and even my aunts and uncles that are, directly my mother or my father's siblings. And part of that is because we didn't have the resource. So like, for the example with the bus, it was nothing. And I think this is why segregation mattered versus integration, and why I see a difference is because with segregation, I didn't have a choice to ride your bus. So my only choice was, because my school was 15 miles away, I had to walk 15 miles a day, or 30 miles a day back and forth if you say, round trip. So 30 miles a day, I had to get up, a 15-mile walk might be like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I had to get up, 2 hours extra early to get there, because at that point in time, my people didn't have a busing system. So then therefore I couldn't, because we didn't have it, it wasn't like I said, oh, I'm choosing their busing system over our busing system. It was, they're the only ones who had that resource and that bus. So sometimes somebody gets sick and tired and say, hey, I'm gonna get on the bus today. My feet hurt, the weather conditions or whatever the case may be, and they take that chance. And they was, some people call them, freedom fighters, some people call them whatever, but they just took that chance, whether it was because of a physical ailment or excuse or weather condition ailment, and Mother Nature, or because they were saying, I'm standing up against the system by doing it this way. Same thing with the restrooms. Sometimes there wasn't a restroom only for Black people, and somebody had to pop a squat and shit, or somebody had to pee and they didn't want to pee on themselves, and they know that, as a Black person, if you just whip it out around a whole bunch of anybody, at that time they locking you up for anything. So sometimes they said, I'm gonna take the chance and go to the bathroom. And so that's why I think for them, segregation was something that they was against, because they didn't have the choice. It wasn't necessarily that they wanted to go there. It was, they wanted the right to go anywhere that they wanted to go.
Yes, and my thing is and I get that point. So let me make sure I'm clear with that. Is my thing is that when we say we didn't have the resources, what was the root of that issue? Where'd that come from? Because if they have it, what prevented us from having the same thing? Because
just becoming free man. So we just became free man with no access to jobs, with no access to housing, to no access to nothing. So I'm just talking about from a historical preference. So I know you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might be talking about like 50s, 60s times or whatever the stuff may be, but I'm just talking about just from historically, at times when things were starting to transition and we were becoming better as a society and all. And so, our infrastructure was laying down train tracks, all of that, blah, blah, blah. And we wasn't riding horses and stuff no more, because we was just becoming free man, and we didn't have no land, no pot to piss in or nothing. That's why we didn't have the resources that they had, where they could buy them a car, or they had cattle and horses to, ride and to own and to farm, and we didn't have that.
I guess so. I'm looking at it since I stick with this since I use Black Wall Street as an example. That was, the massacre occurred in 1921. Like when you think about like the boycott, the segregation from the bathrooms and stuff like that, we could get up into the civil rights movement. But I guess that's my question is, when you think about from 1921, having everything established, doing what we need to do, they took out one community we all know that's in, Tulsa, Oklahoma. How do we get from the 1920s having all of these things established, from movie theaters, having our own vehicles, transportation, et cetera, to a point where maybe 30, 40 years, and I don't want to, excuse me if I don't have the exact time frame, but then now we get to a point to where they have us stripped naked, to where now we have to say, okay, segregation is really now going to impact us because we can't go and do what we want to, but just 40 years ago, we had everything that we had. Does that make sense? That's where I'm at. Like, so how do we go backwards when I felt as if from 1921, it should have been progression?
I don't think we moved backwards. I think it was a situation where you didn't have that everywhere. Like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Weeksville, other communities that we talked about, there was farming, so you had to get in between there. So let's say if I'm going from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I got to ride through Arkansas to visit my family in Tennessee, when I get to that little spot in Arkansas, it might not be a Black restaurant, a Black restroom. And, you might get one of them sundown places. A sundown place is 100% white community where you roll through it. And I think as Black people, we was fighting to say, hey, when I'm going to visit my family in Mississippi and I'm coming from up north, I should be able to stop somewhere in Kentucky and get a bite to eat. It don't mean I got to sit down in your restaurant at your table. Man, I need to go ahead and at least get a sandwich and I'll leave. It was restaurants that wouldn't even serve you the sandwich where you could leave. It was just, we ain't serving you, period, point blank at all. And then you also got to think, as Spears was stating, when they freed the slaves, we was promised our 40 acres and a mule. Here we are in 2022, we still waiting on our 40 acres. You know what I mean? going back to what Spear said, we didn't have the resource. So you had what we had in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but the next community might be, 200 miles away, and the next one might be the next state over. Like we talked about in the previous situation in North Carolina, where Black people had their own political thing going on, education system, this, that, and the other, colleges, things of that nature. But that was the only community like that in North Carolina. To get to that next community, you had to possibly go to South Carolina or go up to Maryland or whatnot. So I think it's just that lack of resources that pretty much got us to that point. I don't think we went backwards. I just think all the Black people that was in between those areas was fighting for, we don't have the resources, so we should be able to do A, B, and C.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I definitely appreciate the knowledge that both of y'all. Of course, y'all are older than me, so I appreciate the knowledge, especially from Spirit's perspective, where he was able to talk to some elders that really break down the difference between how they felt about integration and segregation. Of course, we don't know it all, but of course, I had to play a little devil's advocate because I've even heard even younger people talk about, well, we went back from Black Wall Street, and they don't really see the progression of the totality of it. No matter if you agree with the inclusion or where we're at now, I think there's a lot of different things to talk about with the resources, and we'll be, covering that. It's going to be a couple parts to this series, so we gave you enough for right now. So do your due diligence, leave your comments, share your thoughts. We'll be coming back, so don't fire us up because we're definitely going to dive into it. We can give it to you all on the first part, but I think this is definitely going to be a dope conversation, and I appreciate you brothers on this build and providing the information that you all do have for right now, but definitely stay tuned because we'll be turning up some more.
I just got one thing to say.
Yeah,
real
go ahead,
quick,
go ahead,
like
bro.
30 seconds, just to touch back on your question of where we went to. I do agree that some of us or some part of us did go backwards, but I will say that we can't forget that Tulsa is not the only place that they bombed and destroyed and pillaged and came through and massacred. So that's not the only flourishing community that we had. So I do think some of us got discouraged from, why do this if they're gonna keep doing it to us? But then two, the second part of it, the system got harder for us to navigate through. They started making laws more inconvenient for Black people. They made it harder and stricter for us to get grants and all of this stuff and everything. So then therefore, once they realized that we had the resources and the knowledge and that we wasn't just gonna sit down and lay down, they went, the small print and, in contracts and in different things like that, to where they made it harder for Black people to get. So then therefore, there was I even remember watching something one time where it said in the contract, if a white person sold this to a Black man, that the bank could come back and purchase this from and take it from the Black man, even though the Black man spent his money and everything like that. So they did things like that that made it just harder for us. So that's why I don't think we've seen as many more Tulsa, Oklahomas, or the other surviving communities like Rosewood and different things like that as we've seen because of things like that. And that's all I wanted to touch on before we got off.
Yeah, that's a hell of a point, though. That's a definitely hell of a point.
So as Rose stated, we'll be back next week to further this conversation along, further this dialogue along the way. If after seeing our episode on Friday or listening to our episode on Friday, if you got any comments, concerns, suggestions, inputs, disagreements, or agreements, share that with us on YouTube, on whatever streaming platform, on our IG, on our Facebook, and let us know what you think. And also, if you would like to jump in on this conversation, to dialogue, share your thoughts, or to share some wisdom and knowledge, as long as you ain't on here trying to, make a fool or a mockery of what we're trying to do, you're more than welcome to join. So please reach out to us and let us know how you feel, what you think, and what you think we missed or didn't touch on that we might have in the holster locked and loaded for next week. So we just want to say we appreciate y'all. Happy Black History Month, even though every day and every month is Black History. And now for our Black Business Minute. So for our Black Business Minute this week, we have Brown Mill, Brown Mill Company is a clothing brand, and it's in Newark, New Jersey. Brown Mill is a New Jersey-based clothing brand founded in 2009, influenced by the work ethic of founder and CEO Justice Pitt Goodson's grandparents. At the cross-current of bespoke tailoring and streetwear, Brown Mill handcrafts garments including collared shirts, embroidered jackets, graphic tees, and single-cut pants custom for every individual. Brown Mill is an innovative lifestyle brand of luxury clothing touted as a combination of bespoke tailoring and streetwear. All of Brown Mill's clothes are produced using recycled textile material, which comes from clothing waste, donations, imports, and thrift stores, driven by a strategy of urban upcycling. Places of salvaged material are incorporated into every design, creating entirely new garments crafted to perfection. The style is further motivated by its ties to the community and to the urban backdrop in which it began, drawing heavily from the Black and Brown cultural experience in America. The clothing and accessories produced by this company range from hats and tops to outerwear and pants. Each customer receives a custom product, individual in its own right, just as Brown Mill stands as a unique clothing brand in an industry of imitators. By allowing their cultural background as Black Americans, in addition to familiar high-end brands like vintage Ralph Lauren and Savile Row tailoring to inform their clothing style, Brown Mill is able to bridge the gap between streetwear and high fashion. Sustainability is a pillar of Brown Mill's business and life practices. The company's mission is to reduce waste and to inspire sustainable lifestyles. Brown Mill's products is clothing with the environment in mind, upcycling discarded textiles to create one-on-one pieces. And that's Brown Mill. And you can find them on Instagram at Brown Mill Company. And so that's BROWNMILL Company, COMPANY. And again, you can order from them. They have a link tree, and you can order from them from IG or the link tree that connects somewhat to their website.
Shout out to Brown Mill.
Shout out. Our Spring Black Person Week is going to go to Miss Phyllis Wheatley, born in 1753. She was born in West Africa and was sold into slavery at the age of 7 and brought to the New England area. She is the very first African-American author of a published book of poetry to be published. So she's the very first Black author to get her books of poems to be published. The name of his poems on various subjects, religious and morale. The one thing I'm looking at the cover of this book that kind of pisses me off, it has her name that's by Phyllis Wheatley right under that, Negro servant to Mr. John Wheatley of New England. Why it just couldn't be her book? Why we gotta put the servant on there? But Miss Phyllis Wheatley, a famous poetry writer and religious writers, our Supreme Black Person Week, has been the first Black person to have a book published. And they had to go all the way to London to get that publication done.
Salute to Ms. Wheatley.
With that being said, for all our queens out there, put your crown on, tip that thing to the side, let them know you're a queen. For all our kings out there, put your crown on, tip that thing to the side, let them know you are a king. And we are supremely Black, and we out.